What's up, Dragon Brood? We've now had Edge of Eternities for a full week, so I figured it'd be interesting to kind of do a quick recap, if you will, of things we learned from the first week of playing with Edge of Eternities. First things first, spaceships are actually a thing, but I wouldn't say all of them. I think there's going to be still some stuff to be discovered about a few of them, but the ones we're seeing right now that at least have popped up in ladder play and even any tournament decks happen to be the ones that mostly have enter the battlefield abilities, which isn't that surprising. Whether we're talking about something like Larval Scoutlander, where you can go search for some lands with enter battlefield because this triggers all the landfall stuff, or even just ramps you up a bit, like nothing wrong with this. Or even say something like this Ariema, where you actually just to go search a creature, and then the creatures you get are now protected and can just station this vehicle or spacecraft. And I've seen like the red one that enters play, dealing damage, stuff like that starting to show up. But I think we're still trying to figure out a lot of the cards. I think it's going to be more difficult to play the spacecraft that only do stuff after they're turned on. Those tend to be more limited play stuff, but we are finding uses for the spacecraft, which is kind of nice. And while we're thinking about it or talking about it, I at least want to mention planets. These kind of fall somewhat in the same area as spacecraft, but I think more importantly is understanding which ones we're seeing and which ones we're not. Right now, we see the white and the black one show up in a few different lists with some regularity if you're playing on the ladder. We've seen the red one appear a couple of times, and the green one and the blue one have mostly been MIA. And I kind of get it, right? One of the things we talked about on the green one that basically becomes a, what do you call it, Gaia's Cradle, is that you have to spend mana to even turn it on to begin with, but also tapping all your creatures to activate it means you already had a bunch of mana, so you already played a bunch of your stuff, so don't know if that's really going to have a home right now. The blue one has a bit of a different problem because it wants you to play a bunch of artifacts, but then you need a bunch of creatures for it. But if you're playing creatures, you could probably already do whatever you need to do. So I don't know how I feel about that either, but it kind of is what it is. Lander tokens, those haven't gotten a lot of love yet. And I kind of get it. We're playing some cards. This is probably Sammy's Curiosity that, it's just one green, you gain life, you get a Lander token. This is probably the one I've seen that does the least, but still makes a Lander token. Like, we're playing some of the biotech specialists or whatever that also let you sacrifice stuff and deal damage. Like, there's some things like that that we're willing to play. If the other ability is already good and it makes a Lander token, we're almost accepting the Lander token as a bonus. But we're not really focusing on cards that make Lander tokens. As it stands, we still have a bunch of cards that still just make treasures and such, and those are just better. And it's easier to activate, sacrifice, whatever, the treasure versus a Lander token. So while I do think Lander tokens still are useful and they still have a place, I don't think we found a way to maximize them yet. And it's a little bit tough because the set's only going to really be highlighted in standard for the next 6 weeks before we start really getting into Spider-Man. And we're not going to have other stuff that makes Lander tokens, I imagine, for quite a while. So if we don't find a use for them in a couple weeks, we're probably not going to. Not saying Lander tokens are bad, just they haven't made an impact so far on any of the 60-card gameplay. Oh, and wanted to say that graveyard decks are still a thing if you're playing on the ladder. And it's always one of these weird situations because if you're playing competitively, they don't show up all that much. But I would say that at least a good third of my matches on the standard ladder are against different types of graveyard decks. Whether you're talking about Arden to do some things and get stuff back, whether you're just trying to hard reanimate like Valgavoth still, that's a thing. We do still have lots of quality reanimation cards, so not a surprise that people are still wanting to play it. And those strategies tend to be pretty easy. However, one of the things I've learned is just play with some 4 to 6 cards in your deck that deal with the graveyard, and you're going to win way more of those matches than you would think. I mean, the number of times I've had people scoop after a paleontologist stops their first reanimation spell is kind of high. Same thing with Scavenging Ooze, Vacuum, any of that stuff. Rest in peace if you don't care about your graveyard. There's still a lot of answers. So while those decks can be explosive and powerful and have really big turns, they aren't really dominating. But people seem to like them enough that you're going to keep seeing them on the ladder, at least for the reasonable foreseeable future. Oh, and I think there was a point where people thought control decks were going to take over the meta. That hasn't really happened yet. Admittedly, we got stuff like Pinnacle Star Cage and whatever the thing is about the star charts, the blue card that lets you search. Those are fantastic, good cards, and I think we're going to continue to see those. However, they haven't really dominated enough to where those decks have become the thing you have to worry about on the ladder. Now, that being said, they are showing up more often than they used to, and I think that's a good thing for a balance sake, even though around here, I'm one of the heads of aggro U. We're not trying to play a bunch of control decks. However, they still need to be part of the metagame, and I don't think that's a bad thing. They also now make for a few more interesting games, which is pretty good. We are seeing them show up a little bit more in tournament play, which is also good to try to balance things out, but they're not dominating, and I think they're kind of where they need to be, which is a good thing if you're a control player, and also if you don't like playing against a pile of control decks. It's kind of like the good, happy medium right now. I think another interesting note is that the format didn't change drastically. And I think people weren't sure if that was going to happen or not because there's a rotation. I do think some decks changed and some got a little weaker and some got a little stronger, but we're still in the first week, so people are going to tend to lean on strategies they already know work, right? If I had a deck in my collection of decks that did pretty well previously, it only needed minor tuning, maybe swap out a couple of lands, it makes sense that I would lean toward playing that more often. So I don't think we're actually going to start seeing real serious innovation until probably another week or so, after people have time to play some real paper tournaments, spend their paychecks, go build their new decks, whatever it is. Also, just having time to play with the new cards, understand them better, and not feel like you're risking your resources, your wild cards, whatever, as much, and actually getting to take a chance on something a little bit new and different. I think if you're following various creators, still seeing a lot of cool stuff, and sometimes that's where ideas start. So keep your eye on what new cards are popping up, because I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing them a little bit more over the next couple of weeks. Definitely more so than you did this past week. I would also say I think we, at least if you've been playing on the ladder, have seen probably 4 creatures more than all the other ones so far. Umbral Caller Zealot, and a bunch of stuff. If you need anything to be sacrificed, this is your thing. Or even just to surveil and get stuff in your graveyard. Biotech Specialists, I believe that's the name, the green-red 1/3 that you can sacrifice artifacts, and sometimes played in conjunction with the Umbral Caller Zealot. Ouroboroi, this is the card I think people want you to put in every single green creature deck possible. Even when it doesn't make total sense, the card just does big things, and everybody wants to put it in every green deck. It's just the way it's going to be for a while. The card's really good, I don't blame them, and it does let games get out of hand if it survives for even 2 turns, so it kind of makes sense that people want to put it in every deck. But yeah, you're going to keep seeing this card for a while. And finally, Cosmic Grand Zenith. I don't think we've seen all the things we can do with this card yet. While it can be played in just a regular creature deck, you can go aggro with green stuff and maybe try to plot or do some of those things. You can also just play it with blue spells that are a bunch of cantrip things. I've seen people playing it with red spells that are also trying to play the spells that let you discard and draw, so you can play 2 spells a turn. So lots of things you could do with this, and I don't think we know what the best use is. But I would expect all these cards to stay around for a very long time. I can't see a world where people aren't going to enjoy playing with these on the ladder. While I don't think any of these are necessarily dominating competitive play, they have shown up on some level, which is at least a good sign, but I definitely expect them to be played on the ladder quite a lot still. But I do have 2 questions for you. One, has there been things that surprised you or didn't surprise you here in the early goings of the season? Things that maybe you expected to change or didn't, or cards that maybe overperformed for you? The other is, do you like these types of videos and updates? I just kind of had a minute, wanted to record something and see how y'all felt about it, because I think these are type of updates that could be helpful if you're not sure, but it's extra information. Either way, y'all let me know in the comments, and watch another video, because it always helps the channel, and subscribe if you hadn't. I'd really appreciate it, so you don't miss the future ones. But that's all I have for now. We'll see you next time.